The 20th century brought us many cruel depictions of what the future may bring. Among these fabricated realities of dystopia, some echoed the very real future ahead, yet critics writ these off as mere fantasy. Little did we know, we were walking into a new world. Imagine a world where you cannot control what you believe, a world where you are fed propaganda constantly, where you're trapped in an echo chamber, and to think outside the box is a crime. George Orwell's 1984, written in 1949, depicts a story where the entire continent is seized under a totalitarian regime and watched by an entity called Big Brother. We follow Winston Smith, who rewrites history in the Ministry of Truth. Smith feels a growing frustration towards the party as he starts to commit thought crimes by writing in a diary. Eventually, he meets Julia, and they fall in love, beginning a covert affair that leads them into joining a group of revolutionaries that plan to overthrow Big Brother. The revolution, however, turns out to be a fox. At the end of the novel, he is tortured and renounces his love for Julia and proclaims his unconditional love to Big Brother. Now, this dystopia is quite terrifying, so you can imagine when the year came and the Orwellian nightmare didn't, people sang in quiet jubilation. But there was a subtler, quieter dystopia that was imagined. In 1895, H.G. Wells published a work called The Time Machine. This work was published in an era of hopeful scientific progress and utopic visions of humanity. Wells, however, would call into question these idealistic notions. In the novel, we meet an unnamed time traveler who tells his tale to his guests over dinner. He claims to have traveled 800,000 years into the future, but where progress has led humanity is horrifying. He finds a world where intelligence isn't needed because change isn't needed. He observes that in this society there are two types of creatures. The Eloys are the ones that flourish during the day and have a comfortable way of life, and the Murlocs, the lower class that lurk in the shadows, creatures that no longer have food and have to rely on cannibalism to feed themselves. He realizes that these two species were born of one, man. Showing the de-evolution of human species through class conflict and scientific progress. Wells believed that the horrors of dystopia were something we would embrace slowly. At the end of the novel, no one believes the time traveler's stories, so he goes back into the time machine to bring back something from the future that no one can doubt. However, it is revealed that the time traveler left 3 years ago, and no one has seen him since. H.G. Wells' mentor was T.H. Huxley, a prominent biologist in his time, who invented the term agnostic. T.H. Huxley's grandson would be Aldous Huxley. And though Aldous Huxley was bitter towards Wells, parallels in their themes were undeniable. In 1932, the idea of dystopia would be changed forever. Aldous Huxley published his championed work, Brave New World, a novel that explores a civilization where the people participate in their own oppression. Embryos are used to birth humans into distinct classes, some more fit to rule than others. Like George Orwell said in his book Animal Farm, all animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others. Echoing this, Brave New World society values efficiency, but more importantly, what the masses feel. The children are indoctrinated at a young age, and the adults wash their stress away with soma, a drug that gives them feelings of bliss. Neither Wells nor Huxley could have expected the digital age. A world that is stimulated by the constant flow of information. A world where everyone seems to have an opinion, but no one knows why they stand for what they do. A world where propaganda is pushed out and echoed across chambers. A world where everyone is connected, and paradoxically, no one is. In other words, it is our brave new world. Although Huxley did not specifically say it would be the likes of television or social media that would be soma, it is fair to say that, quote, television is the soma of Aldous Huxley's Brave New World. One year after the dreaded year of 1984, a media theorist named Neil Postman published his book titled Amusing Ourselves to Death. Its thesis states that although we have escaped the dystopian hellscape of 1984, we forgot about Brave New World. He argues that each technology has a bias. For example, Gutenberg's printing press has a bias towards linguistic mediums, as the radio has a bias towards audible mediums. Then, what is social media or television's bias? Entertainment. Fast cuts and editing that will keep you engaged. That is the bias of television. It is even the bias of this video. Information is now provided with entertainment. Quote, no matter what is depicted or from what point of view, the overarching presumption is that it is there for our amusement and pleasure. End quote. Even when we are confronted with tragedies around the city block or terrorism in our country, we join the newscasters for tomorrow. Why should we? A couple of robberies, riots, and deaths should be enough for us to stay away, but we come back each time. This is to further illustrate the point that news, or quote-unquote educational content, is just thinly disguised entertainment. Here lies the true danger though. Quote, in watching news, they, more than any other segment of the audience, are drawn into an epistemology based on the assumption that all reports of cruelty and death are greatly exaggerated, and, in any case, not to be taken seriously or responded to sanely. We are getting desensitized to tragedies. Think about how many court cases or crimes are dramatized for the sake of entertainment. We are quite literally amusing ourselves to death. When scrolling on social media, you find videos of the latest trend or event, but you are just told that it's here, not what it could be. You're shown that ChatGPT is here, that there is a pandemic, or AI art is taking people's jobs, but not what you can do with or against the AI revolution, or what you can do to help stop the spread of the pandemic. It's just here. To quote Neil Postman, for the first time, we were sent information which answered no question we had asked, and which, in any case, did not permit the right of reply. The author notes a shift from a text-based culture, in which logic and coherency were championed, to now a picture-based culture, in which entertainment is the primary form of communication. And through that, he argues, contrary to what Orwell believed, quote, lies have not been defined as truth, nor truth as lies. All that has happened is that the public has adjusted to incoherence and been amused into indifference. We're taking entertainment to be knowledge, and this is beyond dangerous. I am saying something far more serious than that we are being deprived of authentic information. I am saying that we are losing our sense of what it means to be well informed. Ignorance is always correctable, but what shall we do if we take ignorance to be knowledge? Now, I'm not going to spend more time on Neil Postman's book. I wish to explore one last kind of dystopia. A dystopia that is both more dangerous than 1984 and Brave New World. The dark dystopia of Franz Kafka. The book we are going to focus on here is The Trial. It starts like this. Quote, someone must have slandered Joseph K. For one morning, without having done anything truly wrong, he was arrested. Now, I'm not going to argue if Kafkaesque is a genre of dystopia. I'm just going to grant that it is. Here's the interesting bit of Kafka's story. Usually, when we see a novel of crime, the crime is revealed to us, but not the perpetrator. But Franz Kafka turns this on his head. What if you neither knew the crime you committed or why you were being punished? This is the illogical dystopia of Franz Kafka. One where there is no clear enemy, where there is no clear source of power. Just your crimes and a bureaucracy to justify itself. At the end of the novel, the main character, Joseph K., is murdered by two government officials, and the crime is neither revealed to us or Joseph K. Kafka's work would explode in popularity at the end of the Second World War, which nearly paralleled the theme he presented in this novel. This is why I reason that Kafkaesque dystopia is the most dangerous out of the three presented today. In both 1984 and Brave New World, the challenges that are presented are clear, but of course, they are not easy to overcome. But in The Trial, the challenges are both illogical and difficult to overcome. Okay, but wait. So far, I have said that Kafka's dystopia is more dangerous. However, just because something is more horrifying doesn't mean it's more realistic. The Trial and similar works like 1984 are indeed terrible, but I think at its core, Huxley is a far more accurate depiction of our modern state of affairs. To quote Neil Postman again, in short, Orwell feared that what we hate will ruin us. Huxley feared that what we love will ruin us. It's one thing to hate the people in power for oppressing us, but what if in the end we are oppressing ourselves? What if we would rather die than give up the things we love? What if Huxley's dystopia is just the incipient stages of something far more terrifying, like Orwellian or Kafkaesque dystopia, What shall we do when everything around us becomes illogical and the challenges presented are impossible to overcome? Okay. That was pretty sad. But I do have some good news. However, it starts with a question, like most things. The question is, how can we resist dystopia? And I think we have a lesson to learn from each of these authors. The first one is, when propaganda is spewed at us like in 1984, we often cannot recognize it. No one is immune to propaganda. The solution is this: education. To quote George Orwell, "If you hate violence and don't believe in politics, the only major remedy remaining is education." Number 2, we can learn from Huxley that we will most likely embrace our oppression, so we should try as much as possible not to rely on the things that amuse us for education. Quote, "There is nothing wrong with entertainment. We all build castles in the air. The problems come when we try to live them. So it is to identify how we are being lured, although that is easier said than done." And finally from Kafka. Kafka's characters always face an absurd scenario, yet they always try. But trying well is better than trying terribly. So we can try better by hearing the things we don't want to hear and getting a more cohesive picture of the scenario. To quote 20th century writer Franz Kafka, quote, "I think we ought to read only the kind of books that wound or stab us. If the books we're reading doesn't wake us up with a blow to the head, what are we reading for? We need books that affect us like a disaster, that grieve us deeply, like the death of someone we loved, more than ourselves, like being banished into the forest far from everyone. A book must be the axe for the frozen sea within us. That is my belief." Franz Kafka.